I am so pleased to have so many of you on with us today, and pleased that my colleagues are on so that we can talk a little bit about this legislation and the reason for the legislation. It is the Keeping Our COVID-19 Heroes Employed Act. And this legislation very simply states that if you are deemed an essential employee during the COVID-19 pandemic, you showed up, you went to work, you did your job, you kept this country running, you would be exempt from the federal vaccine mandate. The way I got the idea for the legislation was meeting with Tennesseans, people who are frontline workers and first responders and healthcare workers and law enforcement, airline workers, trucking companies. And so many times they would say, look, we figured out how to handle COVID. Some of them would express concerns about getting the vaccine because of health issues that run in their families. Some had family members that had adverse reactions. Some were looking forward to having another baby and were concerned about getting this. Some who had COVID and had antibodies didn't want to get the vaccine. And it should be your choice. I'm pleased that we have a vaccine. I thank God every day that President Donald Trump had the forethought to do Operation Warp Speed to demand that our federal agencies and the pharmaceutical companies, the private sector, come together, work together, bring their brightest minds, and find a way to get a vaccine to market, therapies into the marketplace to handle COVID, because it is going to be with us. But we're pleased to bring this legislation forward. And let's see, I think Senator Marshall has some remarks, and Senator Braun also has some remarks. So Roger, go ahead.
Yeah, Senator Blackburn, thank you so much. And I'm kind of doing this remotely today, so I don't have as pretty as background, but thank you for your leadership. Most of the folks on the call may know that I'm a physician, and I just remember back in the day when this was all going down, and we asked our frontline workers to be the first ones out there. We didn't know how bad this disease was, if the vaccine was not available yet. We were asking our nurses to run to the sound of the sirens, our police officers, our EMS, and they did it. And now what's happening is they're getting slapped in the face, that they're being told, even though they have natural immunity, is that we're saying that you have to choose the jab or the job. I'm a big believer in natural immunity. It's so sad that this White House, this CDC there's only one size fits all. They see every problem as the nail because all they have is this hammer. But I just know the doctors, the nurses, the police officers back home are so frustrated. But now it's union workers that were working to build defense equipment, and they were essential workers. I think everybody's essential, but those folks that said you have to work and to protect our country, now they're being told jab or job. So it's frustrating. And Marcia, I appreciate your leadership on this, and we'll do everything we can to make sure that we protect those folks and not make them make a choice between the jab or the job.
Yes, and now John Catanzara, who is from the Chicago Fraternal Order of Police. He's the president of this organization. John, we're pleased to have you join us. Go ahead for a couple of seconds.
I just want to say thank you, Senator, for your leadership on this. You know, police officers in Chicago, Illinois, and countrywide have been at the forefront of this fight and still doing their job. This is a profession that has been under attack for various reasons for quite a long time. And this legislation will put a stop to actually lessening the ranks across this country, because retention and recruitment is an issue. The last thing we can afford to do is have more officers off the street protecting American cities in a situation right now because they're making decisions, whether it's religious based, morally based, or decisions with their families. These are hard decisions our officers are making, and they should be personal decisions that they are respected for, and let them go back and do the job and keep America safe. So thank you very much.
And thank you. Thank you for the work that you all do every day to keep communities safe. And I know that some of your Chicago policemen are looking at going across the line into Indiana. And so let's hear from Indiana Senator Mike Braun.
Thank you, Marcia. It's a pleasure to be on something like this. And of course, before I became a senator, a CEO of my company for 37 years. And this is astounding. Never imagined that you'd have the federal government getting into such overdrive to weigh in this fashion. I visited all 92 counties, finished that up in the last recess. Everyone is afraid, not just the essential workers. I'm talking federal employees where that shoe is getting ready to drop any day, and they're going to be the first forced to make a tough decision. Small businesses across the state and the country. But what this shows more than anything is, remember, we spent billions into the trillions to keep people at their jobs through the CARES Act. And now you've got an administration and the other side of the aisle that is forgetting all of that and trying to do something that, in my opinion, is going to be more draconian and have more bad effect than anything we've done along the way. So thank goodness for leading on this, and I hope this catches stride and we use this as the pivot point to get the government to back off with these draconian policies that are not only hitting our cities like Chicago, states across the country, but the private sector that increasingly the other side of the aisle seems to dismiss.
Well, thank you, Senator Braun. And Brandon Judd, who is president of the National Border Patrol Council. When you talk about being on the front line, they are right there at that first line of defense. Brandon, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Senator Blackburn. And again, you've been given a great many thanks, and you're going to continue to get thanks for this piece of legislation that you introduced. You were just down here on the border. You understand that we're in the largest border security crisis that we've ever faced in our nation's history. And when common sense just simply doesn't prevail in Washington, D.C., this piece of legislation is, in fact, common sense. We cannot afford at this time, during the biggest crisis as far as border security goes, we can't afford to lose any of our employees. One would be too many, let alone a couple of thousand. Right now, we've had over 6,000 CBP employees that have asked for exemptions to this vaccine mandate. If we lose even a couple of those people, it's a couple too many as far as the border goes today. So again, I appreciate all that you've done to introduce this legislation. Hopefully, common sense will prevail. I'm not expecting it to, but hopefully common sense will prevail and this legislation will get passed. Thank you.
Well, Brandon, we thank you all for the great job you're doing. And as you said, losing a few agents would be very difficult. And we know this administration is not providing the money necessary for overtime. So 6,000 agents short would really begin to change the activity on that southern border. I know federal law enforcement officers have an issue also, and Larry leads the organization, Larry Cosme. Larry, go ahead, and we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Senator Blackburn. Thank you for having us on, having me on. Well, I want to thank you for introducing this legislation, and the reasons why I want to thank you is because the essential workers that the doctor talked about earlier, we're making split-second decisions to maximize the public health and safety throughout the pandemic, and now to villainize these essential workers by telling them, like, you have to have a mandated vaccine and you can't make decisions about your own health. That's sort of demoralizing and demeaning to the men and women that are essential workers and the people that we represent in the federal law enforcement community. And it's important to recognize that these individuals were out there on the front lines, like Brandon was just talking about, and they were taking the hits, and no one really cared at that time or worried about making them essential in terms of getting the vaccine to them, because we were advocating for the vaccine from the very start. And that's something that we always told this administration, make sure that these vaccines are made available on a voluntary basis to the men and women in law enforcement. So we want to thank you for introducing this legislation, and we look forward to seeing how it moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And you're so right. Voluntary. If you talk with your doctor and you're a candidate for the vaccine and want to take it, it should be your option to take that vaccine. We have supply chain issues in this country. And of course, there are concerns about these supply chain issues being made worse because of this federal mandate. Todd Spencer is president of the Owner Operator Independent Drivers Association. So Todd, love to hear from you. You're on mute, Todd. There you go.
Rookie mistake, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you, Senator, for taking this on the lead on this important issue. OOIDA was started nearly 50 years ago to advocate for the interests of owner-operators and small fleet truckers. The vast majority of the trucking industry is made up of small businesses. Throughout the pandemic, our folks came through big time to meet the needs of America, to provide all of our essentials, life's essentials. And too often they did that at sacrifice to themselves, and that they struggle to find places to stop, to eat, to use bathroom facilities, or to find needed rest. And ironically, the truckers as a group have been subjected to probably more regulations of dubious merit that oftentimes either create no benefit and sometimes actually result in a negative benefit. We believe that COVID is a real issue. It's a serious issue, but it is also one that doesn't rise to the level of another mandate from on high. And I want to thank you for sharing that perspective. Also want to thank you for stepping up in the area of emission regulations that end up minimizing emission regulations by simply shutting trucks down. That makes no sense either. So again, thank you very much for your leadership on this important issue.
Well, thank you. And we are a logistics state in Tennessee, especially over on the west side. And David Owen, who is president of the National Association of Small Trucking Companies, is with us. David?
Thank you, Senator Blackburn, for having me on, and thank you for your reaction to this at, as you said, warp speed. I echo a lot of the thoughts you've already that I've already heard, but I'd like to reiterate, this is just a good start. One person that's already commented made the point that everybody's essential when it comes to jobs in the world we're in today, but it's particularly so in trucking. I don't think the receiving public understands that trucks have to run every day, nonstop. They can't miss a day. Drivers can't miss a day. You're already seeing shortages in the grocery stores. You're going to see shortages in fuel. Fuel prices are going to continue to go sky high. What you're doing is very, very important, and we wholeheartedly support what you're doing, and hope that we can use this as something that gets this draconian, overbearing administration under control.
Well, thank you so much. And I want to thank my colleagues who have stepped up and are working with me on this. And on the House side, the bill is being filed by Congressman Tim Burchett and Congresswoman Kat Kamek. And they're going to be pushing it on the House side. And to the organizations who have come forward and are supporting us, we're very grateful. I think we have time for a question or two. So Savannah, I'll send it back to you for the queue.
Yes, ma'am. All right. So if you have a question, if you could please raise your hand on the Zoom. and let us know that you have a question. And then before stating your question, please state your name and outlet. Jordan Davidson, go ahead.
Hi, yes, this is Jordan Davidson with the Federalist. Do you mind clarifying which part of the legislation, what exactly defines essential worker? Is there a universal term that you're using, or who exactly is included in that definition?
You know, Jordan, as we talked among ourselves, essential workers were deemed in local communities. Writ large, you saw healthcare workers, law enforcement, the trucking industry, first responders all across the nation. Other areas, you had construction that was deemed as essential worker. Another area, it may have been grocery store personnel. So you're going to see this play out in different ways across this country. The point is, there are individuals who put serving their community and their country above their well-being. They rolled up their sleeves. They said, this is how we're going to protect ourselves. They adapted as we learned more about COVID-19. They're continuing to adapt because COVID is going to be with us, and they are finding ways to work. This allows them the option of not having to be under the federal vaccine mandate.
All right, thank you. If anyone else has a question and you don't know how to raise your hand, just go ahead and unmute yourself.
Senator Marshall, did you want to add something?
I do, Senator Blackburn. Thanks again. And I got a question for the group here. That you just assembled just an incredible group of folks here. What I've been told is 20 to 50% of blue collar workers have made the decision, and a very informed decision, to not get the vaccine. And for the record, of course, I'm in favor of people to get the vaccine, but not a federal mandate to force them. So if 20 to 50% of the employees on this call have not had the vaccine, and half of them have natural immunity, that's number one, is really frustrating. But what is your labor situation already for some of these groups? Are there people standing in line to take these jobs, or are these folks already facing labor shortages? And then what is that going to do to the supply chain? And Marcia, maybe you'd call on one of these folks here to answer my question for them.
All right, Todd, you want to take a shot at that? Todd, you're muted again. There you go.
Yes, actually, most of the people that we represent, professional truckers, have been in the industry, have been in the business for decades. They have learned to adapt to virtually everything, and they've learned to adapt to virtually everything. But when it comes to an issue like this that is so foreign to them, their initial response is, perhaps it's time for me to look at retirement. And we've seen a lot do that. And this is not something this is not something we'd like to see, or for that matter, is in the interest of the country right now. They have concerns. They've lived through a lot. They believe they rely on their own judgment, and that should be a choice that they make, not the government.
But Todd, you guys already have a labor shortage, right? What is this mandate going to do to your profession?
Well, it's really debatable about whether there is a shortage. What we see on a regular basis is we don't have drivers in the areas where they are needed for that particular moment. And one of the reasons for that is people come and go really, really quickly. And this is a kind of an issue that will simply trigger more to opt for doing other things. Again, as I said earlier in my comments, trucking is a heavily regulated industry, and most all of those regulations target drivers. And, at some point, people say, I've had enough.
Yeah, well, I can tell you in Kansas, we have a huge trucker shortage. I mean, it was a shortage over a year ago. It's exacerbated, and this mandate is going to even clog the supply chains worse and drive up inflation. I bet Marcia's got some shortage of truck drivers in Tennessee too, and
Yes.
Senator Braun in Indiana.
That is so true. All right, we can take one more question, and then I know we all have to move on for some committee meetings and a vote on the floor in a little bit. Anyone else?
Senator Blackburn, this is David Owen. I'd just like to
Yes.
reiterate, whether there is a driver shortage or not, it's perceived or real. There's a shortage of capacity for 100 reasons. And a comment was made earlier about your help in addressing some of the sensor and EPA
Yes.
functions for shortage. All of these things complicate the fragile way our distribution system works, and it is going to be devastating. This if it goes through the way I understand it to be, it will devastate trucking and devastate the economy. This is a really serious issue.
Well, you're right about that. And this is why we have done the legislation to keep these COVID-19 heroes on the job. There are 10.4 million vacant jobs in this country right now. And this is going to add hundreds of thousands of vacant jobs. It will make the supply chain worse. It will mean fewer individuals working in nursing homes and hospitals. It will be fewer cops on the streets. It will endanger what we see with airline workers being able to get these planes in the air, to get them unloaded, and to service the flying public. We're hearing about it through all different components of transportation. So we are here to help solve a problem that exists, not only for Tennesseans, but for workers all across this country. And we are so grateful that you all have joined us today. Thank you so much, and stay in touch. Bye now.